I think one of the biggest butterfly effects I can think of that has happened in my life was when I was about 8 or so. I was endlessly scrolling through YouTube as most kids did back in 2015 when I stumbled across a video. The title was something like Naruto and Sasuke fight for the first time, episode 128 of Naruto, part 1 out of 4, and the thumbnail was something similar to this image from what I remember. I'm sure this video is long gone now due to copyright laws, but I still remember it. So my 8-year-old self obviously clicked on it. Like, just look at it. What 8-year-old wouldn't? And what I saw was some odd stock video of an ocean, and in the corner of the video, in a small box, was the episode playing in 360p. So what did I do? I clicked off of it because I didn't like the format, and from then on, I never clicked a video like it ever again. Look, I was 8, leave me be. So I think about this moment a lot, because talking to people now, this is how a lot of people started watching anime before it got popular, in these small, bad quality boxes on YouTube. So if I'd been just a little more tolerant, maybe I would be in the same boat as OG anime fans. But alas, that didn't happen. So when did I actually start watching anime? It was in 2022. I know, I'm a new anime fan. But I'm not even new, I'm post-new anime fan. From what I know, most new anime fans came in the year of our Lord 2020, when people were locked in their houses with nothing better to do. So I missed that as well. It's like I missed the first train when anime wasn't as cool, but I also missed the late train, so I get this super extra late train that is only reserved for me, and I get off at the station and everyone knows what they're doing because it's been 2 whole years and I'm just clueless. Granted, it's now been 3 years since when I started, so I kind of know what I'm doing now, but I'm still learning new things consistently. So what I wanted to talk about was just my experience and the things I've noticed as a new anime fan. As of writing this video, these are the anime I've watched. These are the anime I'm currently watching, so no spoilers, please. And before you say anything, episode 315. Okay, I know that's not a lot, but look, I can't binge. Speaking of which... So I can't binge. Well, not that I'm physically unable to, but I just don't like to do it. I find myself losing focus when I watch more than 7 or so episodes in a sitting. It's weird because I can sit and watch a movie or play video games for 3 hours, but I think when it's episodic it's different. Weird, I know. But anyway, this obviously makes watching anime a bit difficult, because popular shows are usually above 50 episodes or so. So getting through a show at my snail's pace takes a lot of time. So because of that, I haven't watched many because it takes me ages to finish just one. So when I get asked, oh my god, have you watched this show? The answer is probably no, and if the answer is yes and I'm currently watching it, I'm probably not up to the good bits yet, which gets annoying because having to avoid spoilers is a nightmare most of the time. So please don't spoil anything! As you saw from the beginning of the video, I have barely scratched the surface with the amount of anime I've watched, and I think that's down to the fact that I watch so slowly, so I'm consistently getting bombarded with recommendations. Speaking of which, I genuinely think I've been peer pressured into watching an anime more than any other activity in my life. I've never been pressured to smoke, drink, or take drugs, but when it comes to a 12-episode Japanese animated cartoon that is considered peak, I won't hear the end of it. So combine that with the rate at which I watch these shows, you get a seemingly never-ending watch list. Like seriously, look at this watch list. Every anime I've watched is because a friend or someone online has recommended it to me, so resultantly all the anime I've watched are all considered peak in one way or another. So as you can see from the anime I've already watched, everything is mainstream. I'm yet to find an underground or underrated anime to watch, as everything I've watched already is so critically acclaimed. So I don't have the experience of having that one show that not many people know, but when you do meet someone who does know it, you hit that one Spider-Man meme. Not having watched any underrated anime means a lot of people have called me a tourist, as I only watch the mainstream stuff. Speaking of which, if I'm going to be honest, I don't know why people do this. Why would you put someone down who's entering a fan base you're already a part of and has no ill intent? Surely you would want to greet them with open arms so you can discuss this shared interest you both now have. But I know that's a very idealistic mentality and people on the internet are arseholes. This is my main critique of anime fanbases. I understand that people who aren't as versed in anime may have a take that they believe is true, but because they haven't watched many, it is provably false. However, I can't help but feel that this is a small minority. Most of us are happy to learn and watch more, but labelling someone as a tourist in many ways alienates them from the fanbase. It kicks them out of discourse and conversation about media when they might know as much as people who have watched lots of anime. It's like when you were a kid and you were at a family gathering and the topic of politics came up. You were probably told to leave the room, to go play with your toys, or just to do something to distract yourself. At the time, you probably didn't care because you were just a kid. But imagine that happened to you now. You still don't get a say because you haven't lived as long as your parents. You'd probably feel as if you were being sidelined and ignored, which is kind of the case with these so-called tourists. There shouldn't be such a pushback against new fans, because why wouldn't you want more people to have a conversation with about the things you like? But instead, people disregard points new fans make without hearing them out. I think everyone equally gets the right to discuss media, and anime is no exception. There are so many anime, meaning so many different people can enjoy the art form, so we should be accepting of that. There's literally an anime for everything. Speaking of which, hey, do you want a show that is just straight action with little to no plot, but the fights look really cool and the animation quality is incredible? No? Okay, how about a show that has a very slow burn plot driven narrative that questions themes on loss and love, where there aren't many fights, but when the fights do happen, it's action packed and the animation is great? Still no? Okay, how about a love story where the two characters are consistently trying to convince the other to confess their feelings even though they know they like each other, and in doing so, silly scenarios and wacky hijinks ensues? No? Okay, how about the best TV show you've ever seen? Twice. Okay, how about... You get the idea. When I first started watching anime, I had no idea that the breadth and amount was so staggering. There are so many themes, concepts and narratives that are portrayed through this medium that aren't just teenage boy tries hard to get stronger and defeats the villain, even though that is a lot of them. I think because the medium is animation, you don't need to be realistic. In movies or TV shows, even though there are fantasy and sci-fi genres, the need for realism has to be there, as realistic things will always be easier to film. Think things like Alien or the Uruk-hai from Lord of the Rings. They still resemble a humanistic structure. Why? Well, because humans have to actually play them. It is only now, with the world of CGI and advanced cosmetics, we can actually test the boundaries of realism. But it is nowhere near the possibilities of animation. But with anime, these restrictions don't exist. The restriction is as far as the creative mind can go, because they're drawings. There are no worldly restrictions to pencil and paper. So realism and logic can go out the window in some cases. Like, do you want your main character to be reincarnated as a vending machine? Boom, there you go. I haven't actually watched this show, so I have no idea what the plot is. Is his biggest foe like Uber Eats? What's the arch nemesis of a vending machine? I have no idea. Anyway, this is the reason why I encourage any non-anime watchers to at least give anime a go, because I'm sure somewhere there's something that you'll enjoy, because of the plethora of options. But I think because there are so many anime, it can be difficult to choose a singular one. Do I think this is the reason as to why most people don't watch anime? Not at all. I think the main reason is the stigma that surrounds watching anime, and the fact that anime is labelled as weird. Speaking of which, I think as time has passed, and especially since the pandemic, more and more people are being accepting of anime as a form of media. However, I don't think I can comfortably say that the stigma of it being weird has been entirely erased. I still have that awkward phase when I've met a new person who seems to have a similar personality to me, and I'm asking questions in a kind of code to try and scout out if that individual watches anime, because I don't want to outrightly say it, because what if they don't? And suddenly, I'm the weirdo, which I obviously don't want to happen. So this apprehension clearly shows that the stigma has been by no means eradicated. So as someone who is new in this fanbase, I would like to understand the reasons as to why it is labelled as weird. Honestly, I think one of the biggest reasons is just the fact that anime is not from the West. Anime is from Japan, a culture that is traditionally vastly different to the culture in the West, so obviously the storytelling is going to mirror that. In the West, we have comic books, whilst in Japan there's manga, for example. Now, whilst you can draw on similarities between these, the differences are stark, and that's going to create an unfamiliarity that might result in people being reluctant to indulge. As a result, those who do choose to indulge might be ostracized from their original group because they don't assimilate. This isn't even exclusively a Western phenomenon. In Japan, for example, there is a subculture of individuals who embrace the Western hip-hop culture, where they dress and rap like the hip-hop stars we see in the West. Now, I'm going to make, I think, a fair assumption in saying that these people are probably also seen as weird for celebrating a culture different to theirs. Now, I should clarify, there is a difference between celebrating a culture and appropriating it, and unfortunately in both of these groups that does take place, and that is a problem that needs to be addressed. However, it is by no means the majority in either. Most individuals are aiming to celebrate the culture and not steal it. Anyway, these groups of people who do choose to take part in celebrating foreign cultures end up creating their own subcultures that are not seen as fitting in with the status quo of regular society. So as a result, there are lots of negative connotations associated with anime fans, or more specifically weeb culture, in the West, because the culture they are celebrating is unfamiliar. Now, am I going to sit here and deny the fact that there are individuals who take aspects of the subculture too far, where, as a result, real people get hurt, mentally and physically? No, not at all, because that would be incredibly ignorant. However, I do believe it is a massive generalization. People are incredibly quick to call people weird or cringe, when in my eyes it is simply self-expression. What makes this more interesting is that this self-expression actually takes place in other subcultures as well, but for some reason when they do it, it is socially accepted. For example, if someone really liked a sports personality, would they not want to wear their kit? Okay, now tell me how that's any different to someone dressing up as a character who they think is cool that is from an anime they like. Those are two very similar acts, but yet one is seen as cringe. Why? Well, because anime hasn't been normalised nearly enough as sports has been. So what I think needs to happen to solve this issue, and I think we are definitely heading that way, is to just normalise watching anime as if it was a regular TV show or movie. We need to encourage our non-anime fan friends to at least give one anime a shot and see if they enjoy it, and as I said earlier, there is bound to be an anime for anyone just because there's so many. Now, as we spoke about before, there are going to be things within anime that would be new to a Western audience, and I feel like I know this well as a newbie from the West. Back when I started watching, there were, and still are, things that surprised me. However, in my opinion, not all of these surprises are positive, and when you love a medium of storytelling or art, you should be able to critique it. I think one of the more negative surprises for me was fanservice and how it is used. Speaking of which, if you asked me before 2022 what fanservice was, I would have probably said something like, oh, when a producer or writer decides to add a little Easter egg or like a cool moment just for the fans, so it makes enjoying the movie or TV show that much better. I'd probably reel off examples like Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man No Way Home, or when Superman got his black suit in the Snyder Cut. So in many ways, fanservice kind of represents the relationship between the artist and the viewer. It's a way the creator expresses their acknowledgement of fans of their series. Right? Now, if we take this same term, but we now apply it to the anime fanbase, what does this word now mean? Is it like when an anime makes a reference to one of the cult classics, like JoJo's or One Piece? Or when a non-canon team-up movie or show is created? No. What I found out soon after starting to watch anime is that it just means boobs. Like, a lot of boobs. Look, I kind of get it. Actually, no I don't, but I get what they're trying to do. A large demographic of anime fans are teenage boys, and well, teenage boys are teenage boys, so things like this will probably improve their overall watching experience. But will it be that much? Fanservice is dangerous because, first of all, it can limit a female audience. Because, well, I'm sure women don't just want to be seen as eye candy. I'm going to assume they want character depth and narrative for their representation, and want to be able to relate to the characters. It also adds to this anime is weird mentality because, honestly, it is weird. There is usually no narrative benefit for it, and sometimes the proportions even ruin the character design. Look, maybe it is because I'm new that I don't get it, but I don't think my opinion is ever going to change because I don't see the need for it. Just draw women normally, with accurate and realistic body standards, just like how you draw the men. Maybe I'm overgeneralizing here, but if you just got rid of fanservice, I don't think that many people would stop watching. Anyway, small rant over. And I should clarify, I mean unnecessary fanservice, where the aim is to just sexualize the characters. I do not mean sexual themes and imagery being used as a plot device in order to further a narrative, as sometimes those themes make a narrative much more engaging. For example, Chainsaw Man uses sexual themes, but it's to further exemplify the exploitation of the protagonist. This is necessary for the plot, and isn't done to just sexualize its characters for the enjoyment of the viewer. Fanservice is one of those negative qualities I've noticed entering the anime fanbase that I can't help but bring up, because, well, I'm not here to glaze and only focus on the positives. Fanservice is one of the qualities of anime that I don't see my opinion ever changing on, but my opinion has been changed on topics before the more time I spent within anime fanbases. Like shipping, for example. Speaking of which, I think if you look at any fanbase, shipping will be involved within it in some way, shape or form. Hell, we've been shipping since the 7th century BCE. I, for one, have encountered shipping in spaces like the Marvel fanbase, for example, so I've always been exposed to it. However, stepping into the anime fanbase, I had no idea how widespread shipping was within anime communities. Shipping seems to be clearly tied to anime fandoms, whether that's fan art, fan fiction, or skits on TikTok. It seems very important to a lot of different people. When I initially stepped into fandoms for animes I liked, if I'm going to be completely honest, I found shipping a little weird. The idea of pairing two characters together that weren't meant to be together within the narrative seemed odd, especially if one of the characters is already canonically in a relationship with a different character. For me, it's difficult to imagine said character with anyone else but their respective romantic partner, and on top of this, anime fans who ship tend to be incredibly passionate about their show, and then by default their ship, so some shippers take their respective ship a bit too far, like believing that the ship is real and true when in narrative it isn't. However, as I said earlier, my opinion on shipping has changed. Whilst I once believed it was weird, now I don't. When it's done just as a point of discourse and expression and not taken too far, like I said earlier, shipping for me now is just a way people enjoy the media they like. So why should I be the one to be all judgmental? If shipping two characters makes the piece of media more enjoyable, then all power to you. And if I'm being honest, there's some ships that I've seen from videos and whatnot that make sense and I can see existing. And it's interesting to think about what would happen if these characters actually did get together. I also think shipping opens up so many avenues of creative expression that weren't explicitly there before. When you ship, you are building an alternate universe, which, ironically I know means something else in shipping circles, but I can't think of a better phrase. Anyway, this alternate universe allows you to create narratives that haven't been told from within an already existing universe. So it allows for storytelling without the need of building a world or creating characters, as those characters and that world have already been created. The artist is simply building off of that framework. There are fanfiction and pieces of art that are shipping posts, but are just great pieces of art to look at or read, and labeling them as shipping posts shouldn't diminish its quality at all. I think another important role that shipping plays is that it allows for representation for groups that aren't represented nearly enough as they should be, especially within anime. Look at most shonen titles. There's usually a male protagonist who falls in love with a female side character, and that's probably as far as the romance goes. There's little to no LGBTQ+ representation within shonen anime. Well, mainly because that isn't the target demographic, but there is still a sizable amount of fans who identify as LGBTQ+, who want to be seen. They want representation, and that representation just isn't being given to them, unfortunately. So what shipping allows artists to do is to give that representation to the individuals who didn't have it otherwise. It makes these people feel seen, which for me, I highly encourage. The LGBTQ+ community deserves more representation and it's not being given to them, so why not just make it yourself? That's one of the most raw forms of self-expression. I want to conclude this point with saying that anyone should be able to interact with a piece of media in whatever manner they want, as long as it isn't malicious to anyone else. And shipping is no exception to that rule. So I now want to talk about my experiences with what people compare shipping to as its opposite, but to me, they're two sides of the same coin. That being power scaling. Speaking of which, power scaling and shipping are similar in the sense that the negative aspects of both of them are for the same reason. That being passion for a piece of media that ultimately goes too far and can have various consequences. Power scaling is where you take multiple characters from different and or the same anime, and you order those characters based on who you think is more powerful. And I think intrinsically this is not a bad thing. I think it invites discourse and conversation, which I'm always going to encourage. However, what it can become is almost a one-dimensional way of interacting with art. And what I mean by this is people begin to associate their favourite characters based on how powerful they are, which, again, intrinsically isn't wrong, but you begin to view characters only through the lens of power and ability and not their depth and development. For example, my favourite superheroes are Daredevil and Nightwing, two characters who by no means are in the realm of powerful in their respective universes. Both are no stranger to getting their ass kicked in the middle of a fight. However, that's kind of why I like them. I think they are both very developed characters with a lot of depth to them. Them losing a lot of their fights fuels their character development and they come back stronger. Well, probably to just lose again, but that doesn't matter. So, if you looked at these two characters from an extreme power scaling lens, they both must be the worst characters. Why? Oh, because they keep losing. Do you see how that seems so one-dimensional? And I think this can become quite dangerous in how people interact and consume media, where they disregard critical thinking and storytelling to just look at feats and high-power moments. For example, speak to most anime fans and they'll say Solo Leveling's narrative is very simple and there's little to no development among the characters. However, it's carried by its intense fights and brilliant animation. Which, I'm not going to knock, sometimes you just want a power fan to see where the main character is just cool. However, as soon as there's an opportunity for development, it's met with backlash. In Season 2 Episode 9, the protagonist cries. I won't give the reason why, because spoilers, but it's a very valid reason as to why he cries, and I think it would be abnormal to not cry in the situation he was in. This scene is meant to be a turning point for the story and the protagonist. It gives him some depth, some development, and do you want to know how many dislikes this episode got? Over 3,000. For context, this is how many dislikes the episode where he kills a strong demon got. The episode where he cries has more than triple the dislikes. Sung Jin-woo has about 1 million aura farming moments in that whole show, but the one time he is actually vulnerable and shows emotion, people hate it, and this is that one-dimensional way of interacting with art I was speaking about earlier. If you only focus on the power aspect of anime, then you ignore other factors that make a good narrative. As I said earlier, power scaling is good because it invites conversation, but it can fully ruin an anime if people become consumed by the ideology that power is everything. It limits conversation about storytelling and the characters on a deeper level. However, what does interest me is how power scaling actually works between anime, and maybe you guys can help me answer that in the comments, because different anime have different power systems and rules for their respective universes. So how could you possibly compare characters from different anime, especially as a lot of anime have complex power systems? Speaking of which, now this is something I really had to wrap my head around when I first started watching anime. My first anime, as I'm sure matches with other new gen anime fans, was Demon Slayer. Demon Slayer doesn't have the most complicated power system, but the idea of breathing techniques and how they differ from one another was still a bit foreign compared to how power is displayed in Western fiction. Within the West, unless you're reading some in-depth fantasy literature, we are used to power being a vague but important concept within our stories. Think of the Force in Star Wars, or magic in Lord of the Rings, or hell, even Harry Potter, a narrative about wizards doesn't have a concrete set of rules that its magic adheres to. Because if it did, it'd become quite complex, and can come in the way of the story the writer is trying to tell. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing. Tolkien isn't suddenly a worse writer because he didn't write a complex and thought out power system. His works are still regarded highly because the storytelling and world building takes precedence. When you see someone cast a spell in Lord of the Rings, you as the viewer just accept that as something the character can do, because there are no preset rules that the characters need to adhere to. This is where I notice a large difference between that and most anime. Whether it's alchemy, devil fruits or cursed energy, Anime has specific power systems within their shows that characters have to restrict themselves to. These systems usually have rules that are already preset at the beginning of the show, and rarely are these rules broken. This allows for interesting power dynamics between characters, where fights actually seem like a battle between two larger-than-life characters, while still being grounded in an understanding between the watcher and the writer that what is going on makes sense. Like, look at this fight between Gandalf and Saruman. As the viewer, you're kind of just forced to accept that yeah, Saruman can turn Gandalf into a Beyblade. Why? Because he's a wizard. That's why. Again, this is not a critique, it's just a different way of portraying power. But take Itadori and Todo versus Hanami from JJK Season 1. You, as the viewer, understand the power Itadori is pouring into this fight and the significance of Itadori hitting consecutive black flashes. Why? Because we understand the complexity of the power system and how the fundamentals of the system work. We understand cursed energy and how impressive it is that Itadori is harnessing it in such a way. And that feeling can't really be replicated without an in-depth power system. We can't feel that when Saruman turns Gandalf into a Beyblade because we don't understand what can or can't be done by wizards within the universe, as the rules of magic are unclear. Now, this is the beauty of complex power systems, and sometimes, yeah, it's difficult to wrap your head around. I mean, I'm going to be honest, put a gun to my head and tell me to fully explain cursed energy, I'm probably dying. But regardless, to me, it makes the narrative more enjoyable and the fights more engaging. Now, this is one particular aspect of most anime, and it differentiates anime from other forms of media. And, as well as other forms of media, anime is an art form. Speaking of which, I wanted to conclude this video by talking about this topic because I've grown to fall in love with anime as an art form, and when people reject it as a form of entertainment, I kind of feel bad for them because they're missing out, you know? A lot of my favourite pieces of media of all time are anime, and I think that's for a few reasons. I think an obvious reason is the animation itself. So many hard-working, underpaid labour hours go into animating a single episode, and most of the time, you can tell when effort has been put into an episode, and sometimes you can't help but just stare in awe at the art. Whether it's the whimsy of a Ghibli film, or the hardcore battles of shonen anime, or even something as simple as a background, how the sky is drawn on high school hilltops, it all looks beautiful, and you can feel that beauty when you watch it. And also, animation is a great medium. Why? Because it allows us to visually show concepts that just wouldn't be conceivable if filmed. Granted, with CGI improving, live-action movies and TV shows are becoming more capable at showing what would previously be impossible to show, but nowhere near the potential of animation. No CGI could properly capture what a lot of anime are trying to portray. Imagine a live-action Demon Slayer, a show known for its quality animation and beauty. It just wouldn't work. It'd feel clunky and unnatural. Some stories are made to be told in this medium, and that's why anime should be appreciated equally as an art form to the likes of live-action movies and TV shows. On top of animation, it would be ignorant to not talk about the art of voice acting. Voice acting is obviously prevalent in other forms of media like video games, but it is also necessary for most anime. Animation and voice acting go hand in hand, and similarly tons of people work tirelessly in recording booths to make these characters we love come to life. Voice actors need more recognition. A good voice actor can make a character so much better than they already are, and well, some of these performances are Oscar worthy, and they don't get half the recognition they deserve. So next time you're watching an anime, whether in sub or dub, Google who voices the characters, and you'll notice a lot of characters are voiced by the same unbelievably talented individuals. As well as this, I want to talk about openings and endings. Openings and endings of anime can really set the mood and vibe of the show, and man, some of them are actual bangers. Capturing the vibe of the show is very important because it gets you in the mood to watch it. As soon as you hear that opening, you're immediately ready and locked in. And a lot of the time, you find hidden gems of artists that you really like the sound of. My top Spotify artist this year was Masayuki Suzuki, the guy who makes the Kaguya-sama Lovers War openings. And I've listened to everything he's put out in recent years because I love his sound and the vibe of his songs, and I wouldn't have discovered him if I didn't watch the openings to Lovers War. I think all these aspects of anime, when put together, really make it into its own unique art form that needs to be appreciated. It's so much more than adult cartoons. It's a beautiful medium and needs to be treated as such. Thank you for watching this video and letting me talk about my experiences with anime as a new fan. I'd love to hear your opinions, whether you're also new, seasoned, or never have touched anime, but this was my perspective, and I really hope you enjoyed this video because I had a lot of fun making it. If you've watched this far and you like the kind of stuff I do, you can press the subscribe button, and also you can watch my last video, I Want You to Imagine a Vase. It's an allegorical video on the ongoing conflict in Palestine. It's definitely a different tone to this video, but it's important and needs to be shared. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.